Okay, so we are live, obviously privately. So welcome, ladies. This is pre-recorded. This is actually Sunday afternoon. But we're gonna keep talking to you just like we are in the chat and all that. Let me pause it here. So go ahead and talk in the live chat. I know this is a holiday for many people, so this worked out good. This is my friend Trisha. We actually have pretty much become friends through Facebook.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Correct. So I met you one other time.
Yes, one time when your husband actually baptized my husband.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. One other time. So it is, but we have a lot in common on Facebook. You know how you find those like Facebook buddies that you just have a lot in common with? So we clicked onto Facebook and social media, and they don't live super far away. So we get to see them every year or so, something like that. So
and probably more now.
Yes.
But Dominic has a different job, so we can take off time,
nice.
Which is really nice.
Yes, that is nice. Okay, so go ahead and introduce yourself for YouTube land for those that don't know you.
Okay. My name is Trisha. I'm from actually Missouri. Yes, as she said, we kind of met online, I guess. But then then I came and visited her church, and then I've been following Gently Led Sisters for a while, and definitely received a lot of help through it. So
good.
Yeah.
I'm glad. So my whole thing with Gently Led Sisters, I'm trying to get this all set up right here so we're not seeing like, look, there's like Trisha, two Trishas. My whole thing with Gently Led Sisters is I do want it to be a help to women that are struggling with certain things. And I like to have on guests that have different backgrounds than I do. I come from a background where I was saved very early on in life, and I didn't get into a lot of the different types of sins and things that most people have. So I feel as if for me, I have learned a lot through ministry, obviously working with people, but I think it's good to hear from other people who have different experiences. So I asked Trisha to come on today just so we could pre-record and, just take the holiday off tomorrow. We're having a picnic at our house and all that. So let's go into a little bit of your testimony. We'll just start there. So let's give me your testimony of when you were saved.
I got saved. I was like 11. Yeah, I was 11 years old. It wasn't too long before I was going to turn 12. And at that point in my life, we had pretty much been on and off church. Never really, my family wasn't really serious about church though. But my mom decided to pull me out of public school because I had actually gotten yelled at by a teacher because they were teaching things I didn't agree with. And so then I got homeschooled. When I got homeschooled, we started going back to church because mom's like, okay, I need to find someone else who knows what they're doing to help her, figure out how to homeschool us. And because of that, then we're like, oh, let's start attending church with them. And so after that year, I started sitting under preaching. I had heard the gospel growing up. I'm not entirely sure how accurate it was of the gospel that I heard, but I knew that Jesus did die for me. I knew I was a sinner. And so after our year of going to church again, we moved to Missouri, and I had been under conviction that whole year as like, oh, I am not saved. I need to get saved. And so eventually I did get saved. And then not too long after that, we were back again out of church because of disputes between parents and the pastor.
That tends to happen a lot with kids growing up in church, which is one of the reasons, side note. And, we have no outline, so we're just winging this. So I actually don't know much of her story. So we're just having a chat with you all tonight. So side note, this is why I encourage parents to really try to stay in one church and be solid, barring that you have to move for a job or some big life event like that. If you can, to just have your kids grow up in the same church, at least not get out of church. If you're out of church, try to get into one. But I also don't encourage church hopping, so because kids need stability.
Exactly.
So kids need stability. So how long were you out of church, in your teen years?
So whenever we left church, I would have been 12 at that time. And I ended up later on, I moved in with my dad. My parents were divorced. And so I kind of had a rough home life. And so I moved in with my dad. and I just lived with him for a year. I was like about 15 years old.
Mm.
However, during that year, I actually went to an Assemblies of God church. And so I wasn't taught any of the right doctrines. In fact, the whole time they kind of were like, which disclaimer, I do love them, but yes, they weren't saved. But so I felt like a lot of that was just like, hey, I know that you had a Baptist background. Actually, once saved, always saved isn't right. And just, you're not saved if you don't talk in the
right. You don't talk in tongues.
That's what it is.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And so I went to church there for a year, but it really wasn't a growth. Like I remember wanting to grow, but it's like I did not have any food and I didn't know how to find food except for occasionally a friend, which I had very few friends. Being homeschooled when we moved to Missouri, we were very secluded. And at the time, my mom was also she didn't let me hang out with most people. Yeah. And so I just didn't have any.
I was kind of raised similar.
Yeah.
In some ways. My mom was very controlling of what went on, as far as friendships, and very wary.
Yeah.
I did have some close friends growing up, but
right.
But yeah, I know what you're talking about with the whole homeschool thing too. And
yeah, and it gets hard. And we were living out in the middle of nowhere as well. So it's not like, my time spent with people was just piano lesson, cello lesson. It's just like, right. But it's just your teacher. And so after that, going to that church for a year, I moved back in with my mom, and they were still out of church. They hadn't gone back to church. So I actually didn't get back into church again until after I had my daughter. So I had my daughter, I got married, and then I started going into church because I knew if I didn't get my life right, my husband, who was not saved at the time, was probably never going to come to know the Lord. And then my children, maybe I might tell them about God, but if I wasn't living it, then they're going to take my example more than my words. And I knew that it wouldn't work out. So,
right. So how old are your children and names?
Nova is my first one. Nova is 4. And then Steven is my second one. So I just have 2. And he is 2 years old. Yep.
Yep.
And full of mischief.
Yes, as all 2-year-olds are. As she's finding out my kids are normal, just like everyone else's kids.
It's relieving, actually.
Yes. Everyone says that. So here I am relieving mom guilt since I started having kids. No, I've always been very apparent on this show. My kids are kids just like yours. So yeah. And my church has always been really good with not elevating the pastor and his family more than they should, which is also another side note. Nice. So yeah. So, I do have expectations for my own family and my own kids, obviously, but not to the point where everything's a burden to them. Kind of what my husband was talking about this morning, which was a good sermon. Check it out if you want to. But going back to when you got married. So when you got married, you weren't serving the Lord, living for the Lord at all?
No, actually, I ran away from home at 17. I got married when I was 19. Okay. But I kind of in between the awkward stage of, when we left the one church after I got saved and on to 17 years old, I remember just having a desire to serve the Lord. But like I said, I had nothing to go off of it other than what I remembered from hearing sermons when I was like 12. I did listen to sermons, but it's hard when you're not in a household that's promoting it either.
Yes.
Because honestly, growing up, all the TV was rated R. There was a lot of inappropriate stuff that went on, and not just on one side, but on both sides, because my parents were divorced when I was very young. Things I was even introduced to from a very young age, and stuff that it just wasn't good. So I felt like I kind of had a lot going against me, but yes, I did desire, but what was your question again?
You weren't living for the Lord when you got married.
When I got married. Okay, I'm getting to that. Yes, that's the point I was getting to. So no, I ran away from 17, and actually at that point I told everyone that I was agnostic, but I knew in my heart, obviously I knew that Jesus was my savior. And I kept a journal then, and I just remember writing things. Obviously I was very angry and upset, But yeah, if anyone asked me, I didn't want to affiliate with anything Christianity. So when I met my husband, yeah, I pretty much, told him, I believe in God, and oh, I found out he was Catholic. I'm like, oh, you're Catholic? Oh, interesting. Maybe I'll go to mass too and see what that is. But I will say I was very convicted because I knew that was wrong.
So what is agnostic beliefs? Because atheists have beliefs, agnostics have beliefs, as much as they say they, don't. So what, I know atheists, but what about agnostic? What is that?
From my understanding, it's just that they believe that there is a higher being. They just don't know who it is.
Okay.
And so I don't know how deep that goes into things, but that's pretty much where I was like, oh yeah, there's somebody out there, but all well being
but they don't claim it's God.
Right.
Per se.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. And there's a lot of people. I mean, even atheists, they do have to believe. Yes. It's in their heart.
I feel like they have more faith than we do. I feel like it takes more faith to be an atheist than it does to be a Christian.
Right. So exactly.
I do. Okay. So you claimed you're agnostic. And then you met your husband and you ended up getting married pretty quickly after meeting him.
No, actually we got married, a little over a year after I met him.
Okay.
I actually had Nova before we even got married.
Okay.
And so it wasn't until I was probably pregnant with Nova when I started getting convicted, like I really need to clean up my life. And so at that point, I started listening to some online preaching, and because I felt the shame, like, oh, I'm pregnant out of wedlock. And so I'm like, I can't go to a church, and
there
so
you go.
And so I just started listening to some online preaching, and I kind of actually went to the wrong extreme at that point, because then it was like complete 180, as hyper extreme as I could be. And thankfully I had a very gracious husband. And so he was like, okay, these are a lot of really quick changes. And for a moment there, I actually went pretty judgmental, because I feel like it was overcompensating. Like I was living so worldly.
Yes.
And now it's like everything needs to look right. And
let's clean up the outside, and then we can convince everyone that I got my life in order.
Exactly.
That kind of
even just like within my heart, I remember even thinking this, like, God is not going to accept me, and of course not meaning like salvation accept me, but accept who I am, unless I have all my ducks in a row first. Like I have to be doing everything the right way before he's going to even want to forgive me, or even like, almost like look at me. You just felt so much shame. But obviously we know that the Lord's not like that. He wants us to confess, yes, and he says that he is faithful and just, and he will forgive us, and so I kind of wish I would have realized that, how much the Lord loved us just growing up, after I was saved, because I remember there were sins that I would slip into, and then I'd be like, okay, I need to make sure I do everything perfect for the next week before I have any right to stand before the Lord and be like,
kind of like a penance. Yeah. Before you even felt like you were worthy to pray. Something.
Exactly.
That's actually very, very common with Christians. And I had the same question directed to me on Twitter last week. I did a series of tweets, and I was talking about, I just asked, why do you have the convictions or standards that you do? Or do you have it because your favorite preacher has them? So if your favorite preacher got up and said, this is no longer a sin, would you go along with it then? Because your favorite preacher said it? Or do you have that conviction because God has actually put it in your heart and God's put it in your mind? And if you do have those convictions because of that, it doesn't matter what man says. It doesn't matter if man says this is a sin. It doesn't matter if man says it's not a sin. It's just, is your heart right before God, basically. And I think a lot of Christians, they get this. And so someone asked me the question, that's where this is going. Someone asked me the question, do you feel like you have more favor with God because you have standards in your life? And I had to think about it for a minute. And I'm like, I don't believe I'm doing this as per se a way to get favor from God. But on the flip side, I'm doing this to glorify God. This is why I do things in my life. This is why I have standards. This is why I have convictions, to bring glory to God. It's not like I'm trying to be the teacher's pet, or, because we know that God loves us even when we do mess up, but there is, at the end, he is going to say to some, well done, thou good and faithful servant. where he's not going to say that to everyone. So in a way, yes, I'm trying to, but it's almost like they were framing the question. I don't know. They were framing the question in a weird way. Something about favor, but I know for me, I do it to glorify God. And I think Christians can kind of fall into like, oh, well, I can't ask for this until I do this, and this right. Like, I
Yep.
can't ask for this because God's not going to bless me because I sinned, yesterday or whatever. And I do think that is a bad mindset to have.
Right, exactly. And it's like coming to the point also, because there would be times even in my teenage years that, where I thought having, and I'm not against standards. I'm not against setting high standards, because I believe that should be a reflection of how much you love the Lord. Like, hey, God, I love you. I want to serve you. I'm going to set the standard, or even set even an extra standard. And
Right.
so, because there's some people who have high standards for the right reasons and some who have them for the wrong reasons. But I had to come to the place of realizing that I needed to serve the Lord because I loved the Lord.
Yes.
Because I would have phases in my teen years where, I'd have a friend and they'd have very high standards. And so I'd be like, well, I want to look like them. But then here's what's happened later on in life when things were getting rough, especially within my household. My faith was in man, and I was doing it for man. But the thing is man fails us. And so as soon as that comes crashing down, you crash along with your standards instead of God. He will never fail you. So if you're doing it because you genuinely love the Lord, not because of how somebody looks at you, because maybe that person will later say, hey, I don't think this is a sin anymore, but you were doing it for them, so it's like, oh, it's okay if I do this now.
Yes. And I've seen that
Yeah.
when people hold to a standard and then someone, their idol or their favorite preacher declares it not a sin anymore. Well, okay, everything, all bets are off here. This is how I really feel about it. Forget having this rule anymore. But it's all about loving the Lord. And that's what the Bible says. If you love me, keep my commandments, and then it talks about even those who teach you to observe the least commandments. Those are the ones God's pleased with, the ones who teach to observe the least of the commandments. So, and I do think it comes down to a heart condition because men does fail us. I've been in the ministry a long time and it's very disappointing.
Yeah.
But we're sinful men, and men are going to fail you. And I think too, it comes down to balance. It sounds like you had no balance. It sounds like you were either all in sin or you were like all over here, borderline head covering, looking down on everyone else.
Almost actually did the head covering. Almost. I was almost there. Yeah.
See, I have no idea about like everything she went into, but that's how this
that's
goes.
The mentality. Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I definitely went down that path for sure. Yeah. I feel like I'm starting to find more of a balance, but I'm just learning more as I read the Bible. I am seeing so much more how love and charity is exalted. And that's been really eye-opening and freeing in a sense. Not freeing and like, oh, do whatever you want as long as you love the Lord, but that God isn't looking at us and be like, hey, here's a checklist, I want to make sure you meet all of that before we're okay.
Yes.
But instead that he is so gracious with us because we are going to still make mistakes. And I know I definitely still make mistakes, but yeah, I feel like the heart is so important.
Yeah. So after you got married, take us on the journey of how long it took your husband to get saved or what caused him to finally get saved.
So, of course, I was cleaning up my life because I'm like, okay, I felt weird talking to him about the Lord, but then I'm over here cussing.
Yeah.
Okay, so my husband, he never smoked, never like drank. He was totally against that and all that. But I'm over here peer pressuring him to do all these sins. And I watched things I wasn't supposed to watch, and so I was like, okay, I cleaned things up a little bit, and I'm like, I started introducing the gospel to him.
Okay.
And so first it was, I can't remember like vividly everything, but I remember I just started introducing the gospel to him and asking him like exactly what he believes. And he was raised Byzantine Catholic. I don't really know the difference between Byzantine and Roman Catholic, but in the end, they kind of do have the same beliefs of, works and
Right.
whatnot. And so,
I think most of them are, majority of them. That's
what separates us from others is that the works, And so eventually, which he had already had some doubts about the Catholic religion because just growing up, he was raised not to ask questions, basically.
Yeah.
And so I would just show him in scripture, hey, this is why we believe, and whatever doctrine it was relating to salvation. And at first, he really struggled with it because his biggest thing, he was just like, so you're telling me somebody could be like a serial killer and then just at the very end, get saved.
People struggle with that a lot. I've heard that same question. Actually,
that was probably the biggest hurdle. So it was probably I'm trying to think, it's probably about a year and a half after we got together before he got saved. And so, but I started sharing the gospel while I was pregnant, and it was after we had Nova that he even did get saved. And so I actually had explained to him kind of the reprobate doctrine, to be honest. And so, but also if somebody were murdering somebody.
Yeah, that might actually help him now that you say that, because that kind of seems to be their hang up. Like, and I've seen that before too, especially people who have been abused. I don't know, I'm not saying he has been, but I'm talking about other people, because how could this horrible person that has no conscience, so you're telling me if he prayed right before he died, he'd be saved. Well, then when they understand that there are some people that God does give over to that, and that's why they're able to complete such horrible atrocities, that really helps.
Right.
I think that helps the mind.
Yes. And it's funny because I was actually raised with the reprobate doctrine. So it's not something that I learned older in life. Actually, the church I got saved at taught that doctrine. But
a lot of Baptists used to.
Right. I
but
feel like
it's like falling out of favor now.
Right. Because I feel like there's almost a turn to be the most loving, and try to over
the liberal churches. It's all about love and all about extending grace. And how could you say someone couldn't be saved? Well, the Bible says it.
Right. And at one point they could have, but they rejected
it over. And it's a process. It's not like one day suddenly someone is just, they sass their mom and the next day they're a reprobate.
Exactly.
So it's a huge process, and it starts with a lot of things like pride and all these other things that lead up to it. And then it's a gradual thing. And then they have to reject God over and over and over again. And then he says, fine, have your own way.
You don't want me in your mind. I don't want you in mine.
Right.
Yeah. And I remember explaining to my husband actually about the reprobate doctrine. And I was like, the reason that they cannot get saved at that point, it's not because, it's not because of the sin, but because they do not have the conscience to get saved.
Right.
And so, because, I brought him back King David, like we know that David went to heaven, but he did murder a man, he did commit adultery. But here's the difference. His mind, obviously he was saved, and he was repentant and whatnot.
He realized he had done wrong too. Exactly. And he grieved over that. So, and
even a lost person can understand, oh, I did wrong. But someone who has crossed that path and where
Ted
God
Bundy.
has, yeah. Or there was this one video that we saw, and there's like these 13-year-old boys who had done something extremely wicked. And they were just laughing during the whole court. And I looked at my husband, I was like, I know that they're 13, but look at them.
Yeah.
They have no conscience.
Right.
And so it's like,
yeah,
that's the difference, is the mind.
Right.
So
no, definitely. So when you explained that, was it like a light bulb went off, or?
Yeah. Yeah, it was. It took him a day, and then he went to work, and I guess he just thought about it on his shift, and then it just clicked. And now you could talk to him right now, and he has absolutely no doubts about anything. Yeah. So then he called on the Lord.
Right.
And it actually wasn't until Oh, it wasn't until like a year later before he even got baptized, because
Okay.
that was also very hard for him because he was
The
raised
cat-
Catholic.
Did you hear I know you were in the nursery, but my husband talked about that today. He talked about how a lot of Catholics, and he's done this the wrong way, when he approaches newly saved people that came from a Catholic background, they really struggle with baptism because
Yes.
in their mind, it's like they're rejecting their Catholic baptism that they had,
Mhm.
and almost like it's a new faith. Like they're rejecting
Yes.
all that for this new Baptist way of life. And
Yeah.
oh,
The first time he actually ever stepped foot in a Baptist church was when him and I went.
mhm.
And so, yeah, whenever I started asking him about baptism, because he just, at the church we were going to, I don't think there was really any like preaching on baptism. So there
Mhm.
wasn't anything for him to kind of, I guess, get convicted on.
Mhm.
And so I started showing him some scripture. It's like, hey, have you thought about baptism? And for months, it was an extremely sensitive topic.
Yeah.
I mean, it
can be with
yeah.
people from different backgrounds.
And I
Mhm.
remember him saying, well, I've already been baptized, even though it was
See?
just it
Yeah.
was a sprinkling or
Mhm.
whatnot. But he's like, well, I've already been baptized. Why would I have to do it again? Technically, I've done it. And
Right.
so, I showed him some more scripture. And I will say though, one thing I do really regret during that time is I was very pushy. And I wish I could go back and not be so pushy, because
Mhm.
I have learned that, and I'm still working on it because I still make mistakes.
You are a baby when it comes to marriage. How long have you been married?
4 years.
That's a baby. Yeah, you're like a 4-year-old in your relationship. So you're doing well. You're doing well. Stay on this right path. You'll do fine.
But yeah, I was pushy about a lot of things, and now I'm like, it's funny because I don't remember what clicked in my head.
Mhm.
It was probably something on Gently Led Sisters, to be honest. All of like my marriage and parenting stuff, I feel like I have
Aw.
learned from Gently Led
And that,
Sisters, honestly.
ladies and hopefully not gentlemen watching, but ladies, is why we have the show. That's why.
Yes.
Because I get emails all the time. And that's why I wanted to have you on, because so many women have your background. So many women, maybe you weren't saved later in life, but you became backslidden. You got involved in sins and everything, and you had to clean those out of your life. So many women, that happens. So
yes. And
so you were pushy with him.
Yep, I was pushy with him, and something clicked later on. It was probably only like a year ago, maybe a year or so. I think it's probably only been a year. But something clicked to just say something and then pray about it.
Yeah.
And
my philosophy is, and I've learned, and I have been married almost 22 years and I still fail at this, by the way. So I am not perfect. I have to take my own advice, but I have learned what works best for my husband is I say it one time. And it could be very heartfelt. I think about it and then say it, and then you just got to pray about it. Men, at least most men I know, respond better to that than drip, 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 drip.
Yeah, the continual dripping.
Drip, 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 drip. That's super annoying to most men. So, and my husband still just has to tell me, can you please just don't say anything else about it? Like, yep. Right. Take my own advice.
And then
I won't.
It started hitting me. I was just like, okay, I could say everything that I want to say, but in the end, I can't touch their heart. Not like the Lord can. The Lord
cannot be the Holy Spirit.
Nope. That's what the saying was, is that you can't be the Holy Spirit.
No, you can't be the Holy Spirit.
That's what clicked for me. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Do you want, I could kind of going into some of the things that.
Yes, I do, because I know a lot of women struggle with different things that they are. So after your husband got saved, you guys became serious about holy living. And this has been going on now for the last couple years. And you got involved in church, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Good. IFB church.
Yes.
Yes. Which they're going through some stuff now, but I was so proud of you though, that you didn't just give up when all that stuff started happening. We're not really going to go into that part, but her church is going through some trials. And a lot of people at this point, being just a couple years in, really getting their life straightened out.
Yes.
A lot of people would be like, I'm done. This pastor failed me, pastor's wife failed me. I'm walking away, and just throw up their hands and walk out. So I'm glad
it was tempting.
I know. It always is tempting, but I'm glad you stuck to it. And that's why we chatted a little bit about it, but I'm glad you've stuck to it. And I think good things will come from that. You know, raising your kids in a church and staying faithful, God's going to bless that. So what are some things that you started kind of weeding out of your life that were in your life?
Okay, so probably this is a given, but cussing. So cussing was, I probably swore worse than most worldly people. I even had remarks about how bad it was. So
from other people?
Yeah. From people in the workplace.
Yeah.
And so it was pretty bad. It probably took me about a whole year of actively trying not to cuss until I could go through a day and not say something, let something slip. And which was always embarrassing because you never know. Are you going to slip in church? Are you going to slip in front of your
pastor's wife?
Right.
And we've actually, I've had a couple of my church ladies who I love dearly that have slipped in front of me. And you know what? You just have to handle it with grace. I understand, it's okay. I know it was a mistake, and they feel so bad, oh, I'm so sorry. They feel so bad, especially since I know I felt about cussing, but it's hard when it's been a part of your life.
Yes.
For a long time. But what made you even want to change when it came to that area? Was it just through Bible reading? Was it through preaching?
Preaching a lot. For preaching really hit me whenever I started changing, because I was reading and I felt like I was really struggling. It's almost like I needed to be spoon-fed in the beginning. And so
kind of the milk of the word.
The preaching was definitely really convicting. And then of course I had to figure out, okay, how can I phase this out? Because just like trying to not say these words, they just came out and you didn't even know. So I just started consciously thinking in my mind, like wording sentences before I would say it and avoiding those words. Because if I thought it, I was going to say it. If I think it, I'm going to feel it, kind of like what I was saying earlier. I did drink also during my worldly phase. I never did get addicted to that. So that's not something that I could help somebody with because I thought it was disgusting anyways, but it was fun. And you're in the worldly
social drinking, that can be huge. Just the social being out with friends and
right. Smoking, I did smoke as well. I smoked before I was legally old enough. And I found, even though I only smoked a few, like not as much, like I wasn't addicted to it at the time, but it is actually very interesting because after I cleaned up my life, now I crave it. And there are so many times that even it was crazy while we were driving up here, I was just like, yeah, I could go for one. It's like, no, we need to, it's just that spirit's just like, oh, let's do this. But no, I haven't, I cut that out. And every time that, usually when I do feel like wanting to do that, it's usually when we're in the car because it's like
nothing to do.
Exactly. Yeah. Idleness is really, a big issue, which now Dominic did help me with that because he was extremely anti smoking, drugs, or anything. I kind of actually started quitting because of him. Like I was more like a social smoker, but he basically, there was one time where I got in a really depressed state and I smoked half a pack in one sitting. And he and I were still friends and he was just like, never do that again. And so ever since I never really, but yeah, keeping busy. Every time I feel that craving, sometimes I kind of entertain it, which is wrong. But in the end, I remind myself, I think the Lord knows that I'm in a place where I'm serving him. And I remind myself, he is not so small that he can't send somebody in that store to watch me. And sometimes that, even though I want to get to the place where I don't want to do it because I love the Lord, right now it's the fear. Because I know I don't care what state I am. And I could be in a different state and I just tell myself, God is not so small that he would not find a way to, basically catch me. And I know that the Lord is watching. Right. But I kind of keep that mentality because I've heard stories from other people. And so
I'm telling you, we were in the line. We were at Branson for our 15-year anniversary. Every 5 years we go away for a week. And I think it was our 15-year anniversary. We're standing in line at Dixie Stampede. I look over and I see two people and I'm like, wait a minute. And I look again. It was evangelists that we support. Evangelists, the Nettervilles, Scott and Debbie Netterville. And I'm like, what? I mean, how in a million years did we go? You know, they are from originally Illinois. They travel all over the whole year. They're traveling. So we went the same exact week, the same exact time for dinner at Dixie Stampede. I mean, that's just how crazy and coincidental things can be. So yeah, you never know who's watching. And I think the biggest thing for me would be my kids, you know, and your kids too now.
Yes.
They're getting older. They're gonna know all your
They're
faults.
not dumb. Yeah. And I have also been able to watch, I have older mom friends and I've been able to watch them when they slip up and they'll have like teenage kids.
Oh yeah.
Of course the teen, you know, they'll tell me about it and I'm like, you cannot get away with anything. They know.
You cannot get away with anything with teenagers. Teenagers will keep you in line. They can see if you're telling the truth. Hypocrisy. Mom, you don't get up at 6 every morning and read your Bible. You're still sleeping until 7. You know, you cannot lie when you have teenagers.
Right.
They will definitely set you straight.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, you got that coming.
Oh yeah, for sure.
You definitely have that coming. But let's talk a little bit about, so you started to, was it easy to weed those things out? Was it like you just woke up one day and the birds were singing and you're like, woohoo, my life has changed, it's different, I'm done?
Not at all. A part of me literally felt like it died because there was all that and the worldly music and you know, maybe worldly TV. And also at that time when I made things right, all I had were worldly friends. These were my closest friends. These were all the people that I know. And it was hard because as I would get around them, like I wanted to see somebody. I was lonely, you know, and so if I want to hang out with someone, I hung out with my worldly friends. And but when I would get around them, cravings, the desire to do that, like, hey, let's go do something stupid. And
probably even the language around.
Oh, for sure. The language
Worldly.
was changed. And I remember hitting a point and it was a very hard point, but I just remember feeling very strongly that I needed to give it all up. And so I remember praying to the Lord and I was like crying and I just told him, I said, I will give up all of these friends. I will give it all to you. And then I'm like, I just knew in my heart he would supply a friend. And so actually the very next day, one of my childhood friends who was a Christian reached out to me and said, hey, let's hang out. And she's actually a friend that whenever I was in my very worldly state, I was before Dominic, I was actually living with a guy. We were engaged but not married. And so I was living strong sin. And she used to actually send me Bible verses once in a while. And they were always so convicting. And eventually I remember I like blocked her number or something so I could quit receiving those Bible verses. But
because they were working on your heart too much.
Yeah. But now I know if I have a friend who's kind of going through the same thing, just a Bible verse, nothing else. She would just send a Bible verse and nothing else. Occasionally maybe I love you, I'm thinking of you, and I would never respond to her though because I was so convicted. But yeah, so whenever I gave that all up with the friends, he sent a friend the next day, and eventually I got into church and I was able to meet some people, and things kind of fell into place there. As for the rest of the sins, not, you know, it was definitely a gradual process, but honestly, separating from the friends as hard as it was, and I know it was hard for them too. And because I was their, you know, best friend, they knew me as worldly me. My husband knew me as worldly me. And so that was also a big shift for him. And I remember at one point I was just like, he is going to leave me. But he was very,
it usually, and this is the thing that with most people, your story is a little different because a lot of times it's the it's opposite. So He stayed with you even though you were, a lot of times it's the opposite though. I'm trying to think of how it is exactly, but with you, it was funny because even though your husband was unsaved when you married him or when you got together,
and married him, yeah.
he actually had a little bit more clean life than you
Yeah, he
did.
did.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and well, he had a pretty decent background outside of when he up until he was like 5. His mother was actually addicted to drugs, and so he was actually very neglected. Him and his half siblings were.
Aw.
And then his great aunt took them in, but they were very devout Catholics, and they do have very strict standards.
Yeah, they
still.
do.
And so he actually
They
had
do.
very strong. He had a very strong moral compass
Right.
before he and I got together. So yeah, it is funny that I, being the saved one, which I almost feel like it, because I was saved, that I would have gone to such an extreme because I knew what was right.
Right.
And I wanted to not relate to any of that. So I would just go to the extreme opposite side. Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of women, when they get married, they're married to someone, the husband is usually the more worldly. And then he gets saved normally and starts cleaning up his life. And then she's thrilled, and there's usually, I've actually known it where someone begged, her husband was an alcoholic, and she begged, for prayer all the time. Please pray for my husband, he's an alcoholic. He ended up getting saved, and then he cleaned up his life so well, she didn't like it and she left him. So
no way.
Yes. So it was like, what are you doing? This is what you prayed for. Right. So now you're leaving it because of it. So, but yeah, no, so you started getting, and you thought he's gonna leave me because...
Yeah, I thought he was. I was just like, he's gonna be done with me, because everything that we connected on, everything we connected on really was all worldly stuff. And so now, which honestly we are still kind of figuring that out, different ways to connect.
And there's always, and once again, even with the worldly stuff, there is balance. You could do, since I watched worldly movies, now I'm going to throw them all out. We're never going to go to the movies anymore. We're never going to have, we're never going to allow a movie in our home. And that's okay if you think that you're going to fall back into sin by allowing one movie in, but I think maybe those of us who haven't been there are able to just discern, okay, this movie's okay.
Right.
This movie's not.
Yeah. And my strong, so after I started making things right, and how I said I kind of went to the extreme then, I remember cutting out all movies.
Yeah.
I cut out all jokes. Because I was like, we're not supposed to,
like,
gesturing when it's inconvenient, unless you're and all that. And I had actually cut out all jokes. And if you know my husband, he's an extremely goofy person. And so
that's kind of sad.
Yeah. And
so you were on your way to becoming one of these mean Pentecostal ladies that had the head covering and were just like, everything's sin, joking is sin, having fun is sin.
I remember wondering, I was like, our board game's sin? It's fun and there's no productive, it's not productive. Funny. I almost went to that path, and I'm trying to remember what really balanced me out. There was a verse in the Bible, I cannot quote it, but where it was saying that where Paul's like, it's better to be as I am, not get married, because if you are married, you have to mind worldly things, not worldly as in sinful, but things that aren't necessarily, growing the kingdom of God. Right. And then
taking care of your home and feeding your family. And
and then it that verse just kind of resonated with me, and I'm like, oh, there are things that we're doing that aren't directly related to rewards in heaven, but it's part of taking care of our family and their desires and the things that they enjoy. And so and so that was that was good. I was able to balance out there, because that was poor Dominic.
Yes. He's like, oh, I'm on a ride.
I know, but he was sticking it out, and that was surprising. Some other sins that I actually went through as well. I figured maybe this might help some women. This is a lesser kind of, I know a lot of women who go through this sin, but they're too scared to talk about it because it's supposedly like a male sin. Most of even preaching you hear, it's usually preached towards males.
Yes.
But pornography, pornography was
Mhm.
probably my biggest sin. And this was something that I had since I was, oh man, even from a little child, I
Was
remember.
it something, this is something I've been asking a lot because we come into more and more people that struggle with this. It's so prevalent, and I think it's going to get worse the worse the world gets.
Mhm.
Was it something that was introduced to you?
Yes.
Yeah, that's
I
how it always
was-
starts. Every single case, it starts with someone being like, look at this.
Yep. And that's why
Yeah.
also it affected me at such a young age.
Yeah.
I remember being 8 years old and certain things were already stirred up
Mhm.
because I was actually I had gone through molestations
Mm,
by my grandfather when I was probably about 2 or 3, and then again by another when I was about 6 or 7, and then again by a female when I was about 9.
mm.
And my sister also went through some of that, and she's actually the one who opened up the pornography to show me
You
because
think it was like a coping thing, or
I'm kind of confused.
maybe the mind, maybe it just,
I think the mind was just kind of defiled because
yes.
my sister actually later on started defending the child molesters, and
Oh.
she kind of went down a different path.
Mm-hmm.
And so my sister, my older sister, she's not saved, but whenever I was probably a teenager, she started telling everyone nothing ever happened and really defended them. So
That's interesting.
yeah, I'm not sure exactly what happened or what clicked there, but
Mhm.
I really think that being affected like that from such a
Right.
young age, it kind of changes
It
how you
absolutely
think.
does. It absolutely does. And a lot of people deal with that for the rest of their lives.
Yes.
That age, it's such a formative, those years are so formative. And when you're introduced to something, it's like it's seared into your brain,
Yeah.
you know.
It's like
So,
what they say, if you don't show a child love before like the age of 3 or something,
Yes.
it'll be so much harder to teach them. And I feel like it's the same
yes.
with other things. When things are introduced, your mind is still growing, and now it's going to grow around all of that.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. And so from a young age, I remember just the curiosity and even the feelings like of desiring things that, no little kid should be thinking about.
Right.
And
Exactly.
so probably I didn't actually, whenever I was 17 and I left a home, that's when I actually very got addicted to it. Before then, it was just kind of feeling myself. And yeah. And so, and that was from 12. I just did. And it was almost it was just it was a very oppressive, addiction.
Yes.
But
I know a lot of women struggle with it. It's not just a male thing anymore.
No.
And it's a woman thing. My husband and I were just talking about it. He did a couple shows for men about pornography. And he was talking about one of the things that helps is when people realize that pornography and everything that trickles down, it's all connected to human trafficking and children. And when they realize that all that's connected, it really makes an impact. It helps them overcome it, overcome that sin. So how did you eventually give that up? Did you have to have accountability or?
Eventually, so I went on my phone. And you're able to do kind of like parental controls and block certain websites. And so I went ahead and blocked them. So because usually what happened is when I started feeling the temptation arising, if I usually had a second to really think about it, usually I could snap out of it. But if you are just laying in bed and then you feel all of the emotions, it is very hard to stop it in its tracks.
Right.
And so, so having controls to where it's like, oh, you have to unlock this to access it, then you're like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
And usually you can have a second to think about the Lord.
Right.
And to, snap out of it. But another thing sometimes, even now, because I will still get temptations, not as much as I used to. So it does get easier. But, oh, wait, what was I saying?
Sometimes now something that you do.
Oh, I even will sometimes delete social media because the ads, they're just ads that will pop up or pictures of other people, and it will trigger it.
Right.
And so sometimes I'm like, okay, I need to delete Instagram off my phone for a little bit.
Right.
And I try to be careful about what's on it.
Mm-hmm.
Because maybe there's like a content creator and they're usually really funny, but then they start posting stuff that's inappropriate, and then it tempts you and you're like, okay, we needed to just delete all the app for a little bit. The biggest thing I have found whenever the feelings start to arise is to get up. If you can stand up and walk away, it will go away. That is like number one for me, is get up, walk away,
Right.
put the phone down, just walk away.
Well, and I think the biggest thing though in this, and this is why so many people don't get hope or they don't overcome it. You realized you had a problem and you realized you wanted to go overcome it, so you started putting things in place. And I think that's what it takes. I know accountability is another big one. There are programs like Covenant Eyes, but once again, if you really want to, there is a will and a way. You will find your way around that. If you want to sin, you will find it. But just even having a couple of those little things in place to help slow that down. Help slow that pattern down. At least make you think about it before it happens.
And then also I find that a lot of women who struggle with the same addiction really strongly have the mindset, if maybe they watch something, then there's that penance period before they can talk to the Lord. Like, no, just confess it right there to the Lord and just get past it and grow.
Yeah.
Well,
and that's why it bothers me when they do have so-called Christian movies that will put that stuff in there. That's going to stir that up. Like one of my favorite books was Redeeming Love by Francine Rivers. And it was about a prostitute. It was based off the story of Hosea, who God tells to go marry a prostitute. Well, and they had done a movie for it, and they put like almost soft porn scenes in it. And where you're seeing skin and, it really upset me because there's so many people that struggle already with this. And then to just throw that in there and what's supposed to be a Christian movie, I don't know. It kind of upset me. I think they could have definitely kept all that out and kept the storyline with everyone clothed.
They wanted to broaden their audience and who they're targeting it to.
Right. So it really bothers me when Christians start going down that path, because there are people that have had that in their past and they're trying to overcome it. And to me, that's a stumbling block to them.
Yeah. Because just the smallest thing could just trigger it. And then maybe even for some Christians are like, oh, well, this is a Christian movie. Yeah. And then they let themselves watch it. And then it's just a slippery slope. It just goes down into to deeper and worse territory.
Right. Because then, I watched that and God didn't strike me with lightning.
Right. Exactly.
So maybe I can watch this and get away with it. And then I can watch this. And nothing is ever good enough after that. It just gets deeper and deeper.
Right.
And I've tried to instill that in my boys from the time they were little, and then also with my boys, since I have heard that a lot of it is from other people showing, I've tried, if anyone ever tells you they want to show you something on their phone, I don't want you looking, from the time they got their first job at 11 and 12, they didn't have phone yet, but I knew their coworkers would.
Right.
And they, at 11 and 12-year-old boys, they're going to be, some are already, their minds are messed up and defiled, and they're going to be defilers try to defile other people.
Yes, I can say that from experience. I remember being a little kid, and so things that I knew just because of things that happened to me. Yeah. And then of course, then my mom had to explain things very young that no child shouldn't have had to know. Then of course, me being a little child would then go tell like, hey, do you know actually how this works? Yeah. And I remember, I don't even know what kind of clicked in my mind to do that, but I just remember if you're defiled, you like to kind of dirty the other.
Right. Yeah, you do. And so it's something as parents to watch out for too. So what are some differences going forward that you want to instill in your own kids' lives?
Yeah. So immediately as you were talking about like the phone thing, something I'm teaching Nova is any adult who wants to tell you a secret, you run from it. We don't keep secrets. Even with kids, I am teaching her that obviously as she gets older, and this is all learning process for me. So but I'm just explaining we don't need to keep secrets, you know, and if
Mhm.
there's any secret that you have to keep from me, then that's not good because that's
Mhm.
going to hurt somebody, whether it's her or somebody else. And so, I also, if I suspect maybe another child has gone through stuff,
Yeah.
I don't want to alienate them. I do feel bad for them, but I want to be there when they're interacting
Yes.
because just knowing how I was
Yep.
and even my sister, I want to protect Nova.
Yeah.
And of course, Steven. Now I have Steven to think
Yes.
about too.
Mhm. Yeah.
But
And that is so important because my husband has preached messages before about protecting the innocence of our children as long as you can, because they're going to hear these words. They're going to have things explained to them eventually. They're going to be around, my sons are around coworkers all the time, using language and talking filthy talk and, all this stuff. But we want to prolong that. We
Yes.
want to prolong the inevitable as long as possible. So you don't want them to hear it too early, start getting into their mind. You want it to remain innocent as long as possible.
right. And I also know for a fact that I do not plan on letting her have like access to,
Mm-hmm.
I do have an iPad, but the iPad is mine.
Mm-hmm.
And I pretty much put it up somewhere if I let them watch something
Yeah.
because you get curious.
Yeah.
And even as a child, maybe later on, maybe they're just curious about something,
Mhm.
maybe looking at body parts or
You can
just
screen
whatever.
lock it too.
Yes.
So yeah, that's what I do when if they're watching Coco Melon or something, I just lock it.
Yep.
Because I have found a child before just clicking on things
And they
that
don't
have come up on YouTube, and it's
especially
like
if
a
they're
horrible
little
music
kids.
video, and
Yeah.
I'm like, what is going on? Why is this on the history?
Yeah.
Come to find out, well, it just came up and I didn't know how to stop it, but it just kept playing and I just kept watching, because that's how they get them in.
Yeah, exactly.
That's how they pull them in. It's very alluring, and your kids have never seen it. They're like, what is this?
Yeah, exactly. Because they're kids, they're curious.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, oh, they want to know what's going on. But then it's
Yes.
opening doors that I found that once a door is opened, it is extremely hard to close it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I definitely don't plan on letting them have free reign
Mm-hmm.
to any source of Wi-Fi where they can
Yeah.
go looking at other stuff. I've kind of struggled whenever I watch other kids
Mm-hmm.
and not recommending just being, judgmental,
Mm-hmm.
on the parents around out, but sometimes it's very stressful because that they're on social media sites like
Mm-hmm.
TikTok and it's like
Mm-hmm.
they're too young.
Yeah.
They don't understand where to stop.
No, I mean, my 19-year-old, I asked him to take TikTok off his phone. And he's 19 and he lives in my home. But he, for his new channel, we actually put that on Jason Goes to Church on TikTok just because we knew it would get out there more. But we have it only on our desktop. I didn't even want him having it on his phone. Just because when you scroll, I mean, it is a really horrible sight. When you're scrolling, and they tell me, well, mom, you don't understand. Once you start liking stuff, then they tailor all the videos, at first when you get on there, it's like all this trash and blah, blah, blah. But I'm like, I don't want you mindlessly scrolling though, because there's so much that could come up. So even at 19, I've asked him to do that. And he did, he did it fine. But it's just, I don't want to get too carried away with all this. I mean, you have free access, just this little thing. You've got free access right there with just filth. And, my kids didn't get a phone until they were 16. So yeah, I don't do this whole thing at 10 and 11 with the phone,
Yeah.
the smartphone. No.
It is sad because especially just with my upbringing and knowing how easy it is.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
you just know how kids are.
Yep.
And most kids aren't raised in households that have taught them, the right boundaries and whatnot. So yeah, you just know that their mind is probably being changed.
Mm-hmm. So what advice would you give to someone who is finding themselves, maybe they were backslidden, maybe they were saved as a child, maybe they've just been saved a year or two. What advice would you give to them to kind of just get on fire for the Lord, really start blooming for him, loving him, following his commandments, cutting sin out of their life? What would be your advice for them? Loaded question, I know.
Very, very loaded. Yeah. And it's hard because you also don't want to just be generic with people and just be like, oh, just, just do right or whatnot.
Every situation is different for sure.
Yes. But for sure, surrounding yourself with other people who are doing right and serving the Lord, because you're going to become like the people you are around. So good peer pressure for sure. Yeah. And also, if you are mixing crowds, like maybe you have a good group one day and then the next, you have your Sunday, Wednesday group, but then the rest of your week. The thing is you're going to feel embarrassed around your worldly friends. So you're going to want to, look like them when you're around them. Just hang out with the good group. They're going to love you. They're, even if you have faults, they're going to love you. They're going to want to watch you grow. That is probably the biggest thing. And also, making sure you are in a good church, listening to preaching, like let yourself be spoon-fed, and of course get in the Bible, start reading just those baby steps, those first, the milk of the word,
No, that's really good advice. Take it one day at a time. You're not going to be super Christian after deciding to clean your life up after one day.
No. And probably if you are, you might be like me whenever I did that.
You might go to the other extreme where suddenly no one's as good as you, and you're wearing the head covering and being judgmental, and
and just find a love for people. That has also been major for me lately. I know I mentioned love and charity. That's just been so big, because if you think about it, if you are loving someone else and you care about them, you kind of also want to do right for them to help them out, because you don't want to be a stumbling block to them. You don't look at somebody else. I mean, I hope you don't look at someone else and be like, I hope you follow my path and fall in the same sins that lead to a lot of troubles, because those sins only led to depression and loneliness. And in the moment, it seems fun, but then you're laying there at night, especially being a saved believer with the Spirit living within you, and you're just depressed. Yeah. And so you don't want someone else to fall in that. So just loving them, wanting to do right for them, obviously first for the Lord, first because you love the Lord. And but yeah, it's probably the biggest things that helped me, motivated me, and I think would be very beneficial for others.
That's good. So if you have any questions for Trisha, just leave them down below. Comment. I'm sure you'll check them, or I'll tell you. Hey, someone left a comment. So just leave them down below. If it resonated with you, shoot me an email. I never publicly talk about emails or anything, but I do get a lot of emails from a lot of women, and I know the struggles that are out there, and all these things that she mentioned, I know that they're a struggle for a lot of women, and they're becoming more so. The more wicked and the more they're throwing this stuff in our face all the time, the more it's going to lure people in, even if you are a saved believer. But like you said, it's going to lead to depression. It is,
it does for sure.
It's going to lead to unfulfillment. So, our goal is that you live a fulfilled, happy Christian life. So, and I know you have a long ways to go, but I'm hoping you make it the rest of your life, just going forward and serving the Lord and having that balance, and the balance and the love for other people, the love for the Lord, because I think that's missing so much in today's Christianity, even among IFB, it's desperately missing. So,
right. And it's like, if you're doing things because you love the Lord, and not just checking off a list, you don't have to constantly make sure you're doing everything right, because you're like, okay, I don't want to hurt them. I don't want to do wrong by them. And something that, this is just a random thought. I used to think about every time that I did, slip or watch something I shouldn't, I was like, that's another sin that I just laid on the cross of Christ. And that was something that really hit me. Also, I was like, yeah, I'm adding to that, and I want to do the least as least as I can.
Right. No, that's a good thought. So, yep. Well, I hope you all have a good week, and thank you for joining me. Yep. This was like super impromptu. We were going through the lunch line. I'm like, hey, I actually thought about it when I took my shower this morning. So I'm like washing my hair, and I'm like, gently led sisters. Right. I'm either going to do it live tomorrow. So I got to come up with something, or Trisha's here. I could ask her to. I knew we had a little bit different backgrounds just from stuff that we've talked about on Facebook. So I'm like, maybe she can give some pointers too to women that might be struggling, with some of the same things. So we all have different backgrounds, we all have different stories, but hopefully all of our goal is to be the best Christian wife, mom that we can be. So, and we're in it for the long haul.
Yes.
It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yes, exactly.
We're in it for the long haul. So thanks, ladies, for joining. I hope you had a great holiday, and we will see you next week. So.